Morning, everybody. In the interest of time, we'll get going. And really excited to see all of you here this morning. It's going to be a really great discussion about facilities, buildings, real estate. I know a lot of us are thinking about our facilities in this post-COVID world, or I should say, knock on wood, post-COVID world. And so we're really lucky to have Gina Van Sickle and Josh Best here this morning to help walk us through some decision points when we're thinking about facilities and the like. So today we're very lucky to have, as I said, Gina Van Sickle and Josh Best. So Gina Van Sickle is a former professional in the nonprofit world and now a professional in the consulting world for nonprofits. She began JVS Consulting a few years back, but again, her previous role was in fundraising, development, and the like, and now she's brought in her scope even more, and we'll get to hear about JVS and what Gina is doing. As far as Josh Best, also has had quite a few years in the nonprofit realm. For 10 years, I worked here in Kansas City in public and nonprofit organizations. In particular, his area of expertise has been real estate, financial implications around nonprofit workplaces and the like. Also, he is in Gina, I imagine too, have made a move to another area of the country, and they're living the virtual lifestyle, I imagine, with a lot of their clients. And so it's exciting to be able to have them here this morning. So with that, just some sort of idea of how we're going to work this. If you have questions or comments, please just throw them in the chat. Cindy Loffer or myself will tee those up. And the way we're going to try and do it is have if you have a burning comment or question that really needs to be answered right now for clarity's sake, we'll absolutely go for it. But if you have a more substantive question, we'll hold those to the end, and we'll make sure to get to everybody's question when we get there. So with that, let me turn it over to Gina and Josh, and let's get going.
I don't know that I have a lot to add to what Brent said. I've been in nonprofit for about 15 years, actually 16 now. I started in direct service and program planning, and then moved to the fundraising side like a total sucker. So that is kind of my area of expertise now. I'm gonna let Josh take over because facilities is really his piece and his expertise. But JVS Consulting, when we started in 2017, was really important for me to kind of have a mission still in that nonprofit headspace, even though we're technically a for-profit now. So JVS, when we work with clients, we're particularly, as much as possible, we're trying to work with organizations who are actively centering BIPOC communities and voices, and who are adopting anti-racist principles and practices within their organizations. And that's led us to a variety of types of clients, but that's really, I would say, our passion, and we're always the way that we frame our work.
Yeah, so I'll start with a little bit of well, let me build on what Gina was saying. I think what that looks like. What does that look like when you're doing facilities work, which is where the expertise that I bring into JVS. For nonprofits, facilities still need and especially need philanthropic dollars for capital projects, and they need ongoing operational funding to support all the operations inside this building that they've improved or built from the ground up or relocated to, et cetera. So the work that we've done has included some successes like organizing with philanthropy to find targets for funding where they have been overlooked historically before, and advocating for those projects, for those leaders, for those communities with philanthropy. And we've had very good success with it. Facility investment is a major investment in a lot of different ways. It's not just money, but it is definitely money. And it is very risky. And philanthropic dollars are I think for a lot of maybe most nonprofits, is a necessity. So those dollars need to be directed in a way that can shape change, and not just pay for the materials and labor, but yes, pay for the materials and labor, but also empower those leaders and those communities along the way. So we love these types of strategies. We have the technical experience from early on in our careers, and now we're really focused on strategies and organizing, and so we're bringing that to you today. Now, less than an hour to give you an outline for a facility strategy is a lot. So I'm going to spare you a PowerPoint presentation today. We're going to focus on the handout that's been sent out, and what we're trying to do with this handout is we want to get through this handout. We want you to take this away and have this as a general guide for you and your team to begin forging your facility strategy, to continue on with your strategy that maybe you've already started, and perhaps to vet the steps and process of the strategies that you've undertaken so far. And maybe to give a construct of a conversation that you could have with others who are starting their strategy. So this is really all in benefit of the audience today, and not a tool that we have every day. It's really just our knowledge that has shown up here. So with that, I want to get started. We do have a lot to get through. I want to move through this. Let's take a look at this handout, if you can, on the first page. And if you don't have the handout, I'm going to try to be, explanatory as well. So really, we want to emphasize that this document is not going to identify everything you need for a workplace strategy. It's a framework for today's conversation and a framework for other conversations that you can have internally to move things forward. So we want to define workplace. Workplace historically has been the building that you work in, where everyone is expected to go to every day, work on their desktop computer, and then they get to leave when they're supposed to leave. Those days are over. Some organizations never got to leave those days. They stay and remain. Some have changed, and some are only at home now. So we're for purposes of this conversation and for planning, we are redefining workplace as how it's defined here, inclusive of that conventional facility, but also other facilities, co-working facilities, our homes, anywhere with a decent internet connection, and the technology that supports those interconnectivity needs and also security needs that come with working in these places. So we are in a dynamic time. We are definitely in a dynamic time. So there's also what we want to do is we want to walk you through today. We don't just want to hand you a process and say, go get them. We want to talk about what's going on a little bit in the landscape of Kansas City, nonprofit facilities, nonprofit workplaces, and then we want to get back and take that information and apply that towards what's going on in yours, in your organization. And we're going to do this in a way that we feel is a universal approach to problem solving around workplaces, really in the built environment. So that way you're not left on an island feeling like your problems are unique, when I think probably a high percentage of your problems are not unique. So just to kind of come in with a soft touch at first. So agencies and institutions are typically place-based, non-place-based, or hybrid. And you can identify yours to yourself, just to kind of give you a place or find your place right now inside the conversation. And then also in this intro area, how the pandemic affected our workplace. So Gina and I just wrapped up conversations with about 15 different organizations in Kansas City talking about how the pandemic has affected their workplace utilization. And, you know, I take a look at these bullets and see if any of those apply to you. We have found that these are some of the most common feedback items that we've received from different leaders. Okay, so we want to set some expectations moving forward into this conversation. So we're going to talk about, this is going to be a workplace focused decision-making conversation. And in order for any organization to make effective workplace strategy decisions, you need to have a good understanding of your programmatic staffing and administrative needs over the next few years. This is, any facility discussion supports programs. This is a programs first initiative. Any facility project is a programs first initiative for nonprofits. And having a few years of understanding of where your organization is going programmatically and the budget that can support that is going to be helpful, obviously, to you and to funders. If the size of the project starts to move into capital needs where there are lenders involved, be them commercial lenders, not-for-profit lenders, CDFI lenders, then you will have an operating pro forma of 10, probably 10 plus years. So that's an understanding of where your programs are headed in the long term in order to satisfy lenders' needs. And those are just based on typical capital requirements. You're also going to hear some terms today that we feel are interchangeable, at least for purposes of this conversation. So what are those? Workplace, facility, building as a noun, and real estate. So for purposes of this webinar, these terms are meant to describe the built structure that up until March of 2020 was a conventional way to house our work, our organization's work. So reflecting a little bit on who's here and more specifically, the responses that we got to the question, the multiple choice question that we posed. 80% of you have not identified your must-haves for a project, and that's where you are. That's obviously totally fine. Some of you, about half of you, are in discussion. Your leadership's in discussion about potential workplace changes, and the other half, you've begun to investigate potential solutions to what you understand your problems and priorities to be. The rest of you, the 20%, you have, congratulations, you've identified your must-haves. That is not an easy process. And you're working to find options that your board can approve, or you have come up with options that are fundable and can or have achieved financing to take to your board, or maybe pre-approval to your board. So those 20% of you, I think you're going to get a lot from the Q&A today. And also perhaps our hope is that this handout, this conversation can give you some time to reflect on the path that you've taken and see if maybe there's some areas to tighten up, or if maybe you've done a bang up job. And that information should not just sit with you, that information should travel to your friends and your networks. So please share your successes and your lessons learned, because those are hard earned. So what you're going to learn today, so let's start with what you're not going to learn. You're not going to walk away with the solution to your specific needs. I wish we could, but an hour to solve these kinds of things. If anyone promises you that, please don't hesitate to get up and leave the conversation. But I do want to say, after this conversation at any time, Brent's team, our team, we're here for you. We're here to answer questions, talk through things, point you in the right direction, get you what you need so you can keep the process moving along. This is simply, let's say, an introduction to all of us and to perhaps a process that could apply. Okay, here we go. First of all, real estate projects for nonprofits, for profits, if you've bought a home and got a mortgage and gone through closing. These are hard projects. These are arduous, long projects that require a lot of patience, a good team of support, and long-term thinking. And we want to say that you're earning your so-called stripes in these kinds of projects. And we want to acknowledge the hard work that at least 20% of you have taken on, and the other 80% are beginning to undertake or considering to undertake. It's going to be difficult. And I'm here to, I've been called a dream killer before, and I wear that as a badge of honor. This is not fun, but it's going to be an extraordinary process and something that you are not going to regret undertaking. And it's something I love. So that's why I'm here for you guys. This is something I really enjoy. So let's talk about what's going on in the landscape right now from our JVS's view, from our recent conversations with leaders in Kansas City. What we've learned is that I'll give you some quick takeaways, and then we're going to go into categorizing things just for help of moving things forward in the conversation. The hybrid working model is the new norm, and that's not conjecture. That is conversation after conversation after conversation. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the caveat to that is there are organizations that require their facility, and they need to be there each day. That's where they deliver their services. And the hybrid model might work, but it's really not going to apply to them. So there are, through our work and our analysis of the landscape in Kansas City, we've broken this, categorized different, we've come up with categories for different types of organizations based on where their core functions are operating. And I'm going to let Gina break into that a little bit.
Yeah, so the three categories we identified might be pretty obvious. We call one is place-based. These aren't terms we made up, but place-based is what it sounds like. It's an organization that is reliant on physical space to carry out their programs. So early education centers, you have to be there to take care of the children and teach. Most social service organizations are primarily place-based. Non-place-based is the other. Obviously, that's the opposite. They don't necessarily rely on a space to perform their services, except needing a desk or an occasional meeting space, or maybe even an occasional event space if there's particular larger gatherings that they want to have for a particular program. And then the hybrid model, and that is the one that is kind of coming out, dependent on each organization's needs, as a model that a lot of the folks we talk to, even the ones that, at least a portion, maybe even a big portion of their services are place-based or are direct service, that hybrid is something they've adopted in one way or another and don't intend to just let go of when the pandemic is over. So hybrid is obviously a combination of those organizations that are able to coordinate some of their services or their education remotely, and otherwise need to be set in a place for delivering part of their programs, or maybe even working together as a team. So those are the three models. Did I cover that all?
Yeah, you got it. Thanks. So we want to give you a chance to find where you're at in those models, and we also want to take a couple minutes to talk about some of the common problems and solutions that we heard relative to those models. So I think the organizations that we spoke with that are having some of the biggest struggles are the ones that don't have the flexibility to move staff home, to locate to a less expensive place, and even to maybe to divest from a building that they own. And those are the place-based organizations. They're up against CDC guidelines, COVID outbreaks. They are what we hear as staffing shortages, which I contend is actually compensation shortages, which are very real for these organizations. And some of the solutions that they've taken on is really more of a non-traditional co-sharing, co-working, where they're intentionally bringing in other organizations that offer complementary services. So while, yes, they may have some underutilized or unused space, some of that is going to organizations that can provide greater value to their clients and their clients' families and their neighborhoods that they're serving. So there's definitely some entrepreneurship and innovation going on in that space, as long as probably a lot of consumption of ibuprofen. Non-place based are, I think they're experiencing something more on the positive side from what relative to their facilities, to their workplaces, that they are able to let go of leases. They're able to move people home. They're able to just find a desk when they need it. What they're able to do is boil things down to what they absolutely need and make adjustments accordingly, and they're experiencing some cost savings with that. And of course, like, it's not all rainbows and unicorns for them. They are working diligently to make those changes, communicate those changes, and rally around those changes. And then the hybrid working model, there's no formal hybrid working model. Sometimes, some staff can work from home. It provides a work-life balance that maybe wasn't previously there. It's we are also very aware of staff attraction and retention strategies that are going on, and the hybrid working model can definitely provide that. If I turned my laptop around right now, you'd see my 9-year-old son who's at home, and he'll go to school when we're done with this. So that's part of we have somewhat of a hybrid working model as well. All of this, I think, is, the challenge has really come to organizations don't know, are a little unfamiliar with, obviously, these types of maneuvers, but also are unclear where COVID relief funding is going to go. If philanthropy is going to move back to program-focused funding, if philanthropy is going to keep moving down the general operations funding, it is a little bit of a treacherous landscape right now, and I think that the having some flexibility is helping to satisfy some of that with these organizations. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about we've distinguished different types of organizations, problems that those organizations are facing, and some of those solutions. So now we're going to go back to the handout, and we're going to walk through this process that we believe can be applied universally to organizations' needs for developing workplace strategies. So Mark posted just reposted the handout again in the chat, and Brent also posted a link as an additional resource. So thanks to both of you for that. So we're going to go just below the yellow, well, I'm saying yellow box. We're going to number 1, current workplace benefits and costs. So this is a place for you to begin. We're looking at what your workplace situation today, not pre-pandemic, but actually today. And I'm a very practical person when it comes to working through workplace challenges. So, I recommend that you do the same and you be as specific as possible and hold, nothing as sacred. So what we've done to be helpful is we've begun a table for you of benefits, costs, and what's missing. And really, this is picking up a pen and paper on your own and working through what are the benefits of your current workspace, what are the costs of your current workspace, and what's missing in your current workspace. Again, referencing back to workplaces being more than just the conventional building that your operations are set at. So build on those. take your time with those and use our prompts in those boxes to help you move those along. And I will say this, let's say you land on, you get your ideal workplace strategy, fully funded, executed, built, and it's happening. You will still have benefits, costs, and things that are missing. We're not going to land on perfection. If you do, then something is missing. So I'm going to move to the next, moving to number 2. This, now that we've assessed what's happening in the landscape in Kansas City today, we, through your work in the previous, in the previous section of identifying your benefits, costs, and what's missing, you're getting more clear in what's happening and not happening in your organization. Then there's looking forward, and we really want to stress this, that workplace design, workplace strategies, again, facilities, buildings, structures, they're all in supportive programs. This is a program first initiative. And these projects will take a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of heartache. And one great way to set perspective is, how are they serving our communities? Is this strategy we're taking on serving our communities? Can I draw a direct line, or am I drawing a direct line to my personal wish list? So better service to our communities via workplace strategy. So this is something that you can work on in collaboration with other decision makers in your organization. You can work on your own and then bring it into a conversation with them. But either way, this is where the organizing begins and the hard work begins. So these columns are labeled must-haves, value adds, and let go of. So the must-haves, regardless of costs and outside opinions, these are things that your organization needs in order to best serve the communities that you serve and carry out your mission, period. And that's a hill that you may have to die on, but that's something that should be immovable. Value adds. So let's say on top of your must-haves, you're able to add other things, other actions, other things to your facility that are going to support your mission, but you're able to start to achieve a larger vision for your community. Again, not for your organization, a larger vision for your community. And that could be incorporating your clients and your communities into some of these strategy conversations, your partners, complementary organizations, and perhaps even looking at shared space, shared resource strategies. Things to let go of. These are the things that are going to, you will have a hard time acknowledging that they need to be let go of. Or you may have a hard time discussing with others because they'll have a hard time letting go of. This is where really, really good things can happen, is in this section. So are you, for example, our prompts are you a nonprofit that is still stuck in getting by? Are you, just for the sake of levity, are you picking up chairs off the curb that your staff can sit in to do the work because that's good enough? It's not good enough, by the way. Are you holding to bygone ways of working? So my example is, we are going to get every butt in the seat back in the office, masked or no masks. This is where it needs to happen. Is that really the best way to execute your work in this environment and to attract and retain quality staff? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's a challenge. It's a question you need to challenge yourself with. And getting back to my previous point, are you overspending? Are you continuing to overspend? Do you need those expensive chairs? Does your building really need to have that flair you want to it? Who are you investing towards? Is it your community or is it to yourselves? Again, these are not easy questions to ask. This is more pencil to paper, taking these must-haves, value adds, and things to let go of and spending some time with those. And brutal honesty is very, very tough and very necessary for this type of work, because you will be asked to defend your decisions to your other leaders, to your staff, to your communities, to your funders, and to your lenders for years to come. Okay, I'm flipping the handout over to the next other page because I have a hard copy of it. Now we're going to hit the process. We're in the process, and we're going to hit this straight through to the bottom of the page. So you have your must-haves, value adds, and things you need to let go of. Now it's time to put those into one column and prioritize those. So this is again, this is not easy work. This is hard work, but also nothing is set in stone. We're not there. Set in stone is when you've broken ground and you've closed your financing. Then you're pretty much set in stone. But you're in the conceptual stage now, so this is a time to invent and reinvent. So this is when you've done this and you've shuffled your three columns into one. The other decision makers in your organization, and I would say critical key decision makers about your facility strategy, being specific there, they have done the same thing and you're coming together. And maybe you've worked through the process together. You guys have a great working relationship. That's great. And maybe you want to work independently and then come back together. Well, that's fine too. This is when the organizing is really taking part and the rubber's meeting the road. So just for the sake of a dumb analogy, I look at these as decks of cards, and you're each bringing your own deck of cards, and it's time to shuffle those decks into yet perhaps a single deck, but really they're going to be shuffled and reshuffled into separate decks. And the reason why is that we're building options for improvement. So now we're moving to number 4. So you have different options for improvement, and that's operational improvement, that's service delivery improvement, that's facility improvement. All of those are if it's a Venn diagram, there's overlap between those 3. And you could look at these as options for improvement. Another word for that might be scenarios. But really, what are the top 3 to 5 situations that would best serve your community and position your organization to bring out the best that it can, and also bring in philanthropy, bring in partners? And you could look at it different ways. We actually have 3 different ways we could do it, and it would be bang up either way. It could be this is our ideal, A. C is our compromise, and B is somewhere in between. So I strongly recommend 3 to 5 options for improvement, not 6 or more. And if really I had my way, I would limit everyone to 3. It really makes you work through the tough decisions and get very clear on what you need to have and what you don't need to have. And 2 sets up an either or conversation, and I think can create tension in the room when you're working through this. So 3 at a minimum, 5 at a maximum. So once you have these lists of priorities, you have, again, these are shuffled decks of your must-haves, your value adds, and your things you need to let go of. How much space are you going to need to make this happen? So this is common. Space needs are common to any these place-based, non-place-based, and hybrid organizations. So space can include a desk at people's home. You don't necessarily need like the square footage of that, but that's going to occur at home. This is going to occur in a meeting room once in a while that we're going to rent through a membership at a co-working space. We need security for when people enter. We need them to come in off the street, be greeted, and then a secured door for them to enter. That could be something. We need a loading dock. We need a large storage area for this to occur. Think in really practical terms. If you were to draw a box and that was a room, what needs to happen in that room? And what you're doing with that, and I'll get into this a little bit more, is what staff do you need? What roles do you need to carry these options for improvement out? So maybe it's the same amount in each one, maybe not. Where do those staff sit when they're doing their work? Perhaps it's in the office, perhaps it's in the warehouse, perhaps it's in a partner's organizations space. Perhaps it's at home. You know, this is where you're getting clear on how your operations are carried out. And so there's staff, there's all staff, and then I would also say clients. If you have clients coming in, where does that interaction occur? How does that interaction take place? And you know, what are some amenities that you might need to support those as well? Again, we are still in the creative zone, and we're not in setting things in stone yet. So now you have an idea of the number of people, where they're going to be working, what kinds of spaces you need. You can apply room sizes to this if you want. It's not critical at this time, but it may be helpful for you. And if you don't, that's okay. You will have plenty of opportunities down the road in this process. Okay, so moving on to number 5, actually 5A. How much can your organization afford annually to carry out this strategy? So here's my recommendation. You have 2 large sections in a budget looking forward. You have your operations side, and that includes carrying out your programs, paying your staff. That really is your mission. The B section, the second section, is all of your facility costs. And that could be, that's your utility costs, that's maintenance, that's desks and chairs. That could be your technology as well. And I'm always recommending now that technology is considered part of the workplace costs or facility costs, because that's where we are right now. So to carry out your programs, you're doing a budget, an outlook budget. Some organizations do 1 year because that's where they're at. Some are able to do 5 to 10 years. That's great too. So look at your program, your programmatic budget, your revenues and your costs. You're going to have net revenues left over annually. And if you don't have a facility. So something's wrong in the program side. So you need to have enough left over to cover facility costs. And in those options for improvement, the option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E, those try to keep those programmatic costs and revenues the same. Make that a constant across those. And maybe there's some variation, but again, my recommendation is minor. You can throw my recommendation out the window. That's totally fine. But you need to get to an apples to apples comparison when you're looking at a workplace facility strategy and costs. And it's hard to go apples to apples when everything is different scenario to scenario. And again, you're leading with programs. So those are hopefully your financial constants. The second bullet I have is planning for a reserve. So these are a little nuts and bolts, and I'm just going to touch on these, and then we're going to move through these. So plan for reserve. Budget 50 cents to $1 of square foot of workplace for an operating budget to cover maintenance, repairs, replacement of your building and equipment. This is going to remove you from crisis mode if you have a roof leak, if you have a server go down, if you have anything facility, workplace, office related happen, you can cover it. You're out of crisis. Things are moving forward smoothly. That's obviously where you want to be. Planning for inflation. So project future revenues with scrutiny and pad your future costs. So you're building in a little bit, understanding inflation is happening. Inflation's always happening. Right now, everything's getting more expensive every year. You need to plan for some of those to exceed your expectations and some of your revenues to not meet your expectations. And this is hard. This is hard work. But basically, going up to that very top bullet, this is when you make things realistic, and I underscore this, you need to kill hope. Hope cannot exist when you're looking at an outlook on an operational budget. It just It just can't be there. And maybe you have a contingency of, well, we get, 20% comes in, 50% comes in from philanthropy, but obviously we don't know exactly who. Okay, well, look back 3 to 5 years. Is that percentage consistent? Or are you overestimating? And so that way, even if you look backwards, you have a precedent that you're building in and something that you can defend against to your coworkers, to your board, to your funders, and to your lenders. Okay, and then a contingency. In any kind of project, if you have a project management mindset, which I do, there's always a contingency of time, a contingency of cost. So building a line item into your operating pro forma, into your annual budget of a contingency is just smart to do. And pick the percentage that is realistic. It could be 2%, it could be 5%, but keep that as something that that you can cover those unforeseen costs. But let's not just say cost, let's think about investment. What if there's an opportunity to get ahead of something and you don't have cash on hand to do it? And then you're going to a funder, you're writing a proposal, it's months, you're defending, now you've got a whole branch to a tree you've had to build, when you could have just simply put $25,000, just a number, into something to see if that's realistic for you. And you can move quickly and be entrepreneurial about it. Okay, moving to 5B now. Okay, now we've talked about annual ongoing costs. We're going to talk about one-time costs. So in any kind of workplace investment, facility investment, building investment conversation, again, using those terms interchangeably, there's one-time costs. So back in the pre-pandemic world, those were construction costs, typically considered hard and soft costs. And you build your brick and mortar and everything that goes inside of it, it's a one-time cost. You get philanthropy to come in, you get a lender to come in, you put in a little bit, and boom, you've got your project, you're going. Well, we're in a different place now. Some of you need to move out of where you're at to reduce costs, and you're going to have moving costs. You need to get away from desktop computers and buy laptop computers. You need to buy new modems. You need to buy furniture for people at home. We could go into it. And some of you are going to have a conventional bricks and mortar project. You'll have that as well. What I'm stressing here is these are one-time costs that your organization will need to contribute, most likely need to contribute something to. Funders will need to contribute something to. Maybe it's a capital campaign, maybe not. And lenders, depending on the size, you may need a lender to come in and contribute towards that. These are all one-time costs for your executing that workplace strategy. Some you will have to work into your annual operating costs, perhaps if you're paying a loan back, as an example, or you want to carry a line of credit now where you didn't carry a line of credit before. That's going to be something that you work into your operating costs too. Also, I want to talk about ramp-up costs for just a second. So when you're making a change, and whether you're divesting, shrinking, growing, expanding, relocating, there is more than likely going to be a time where your costs are going to outpace your revenues, and until you meet your goals, your operating goals. So that's the ramp up period, and that is totally fundable by philanthropy. They like funding in those ramp ups. It's not a guarantee. I don't run a philanthropy and I don't work for one, but I have seen them cover these costs because they're on board with the direction the organization's going. They understand those costs are necessary. And I would strongly recommend, if you can avoid it, you may not be able to, but if you can avoid it, do not borrow for those costs. Those are one-time costs that you don't want to be paying a ramp-up cost 5 years from now with interest. It's just not, it's a hard pill to swallow when you're looking at your budget. Okay, moving on to number 6. So this is putting it all together. So you have completed your planning. You have budgets, your one-time cost budget, your ongoing budgets. You have the spaces that you need. You understand how interactions occur between your staff and your clients and your communities. You have the technology, you have the space to facilitate those interactions. The next step obviously is going to be construction or moving or whatever that might be. So that's going to be, I'm going to build this into the putting it all together recommendations section. And that's going to be, well, it's in here. So stay objective as you can at this point, moving forward and through this process. This is a long, like I said before, a long, arduous process. Identify critical project roles from concept to completion. So who needs to be doing what in order to facilitate the items on this worksheet? When we move into design and construction, or just moving, or purchasing, who is going to be doing that? And who has capacity for that? Is there truly internal capacity to carry this out? Or is the capacity more like we'll review and agree or disagree, approve or not approve decisions that are brought to us or recommendations that are brought to us? But that's really the limits of our capacity. This is really need to be honest about capacity. This is a lot of time. I would consider, so along those lines, consider forming or re-energizing a facilities, funding, finance, whatever that name might be, board committee. So you might have a board member who is an architect. There are architects everywhere in Kansas City. You can't get away from them. There's a lot of contractors in Kansas City. There's a lot of development lawyers in Kansas City. There's a lot of bankers in Kansas City. If you don't need necessarily to bring them on as board members, if you don't have that already, what you could do is form a committee and they can come on and volunteer inside that committee, be a non-voting committee member, like basically non-voting board member. They'd vote on the committee to make recommendations to the board and provide their expertise, but they would not be a voting board member. So you don't have to completely build out your internal infrastructure for this. I wanted to give you some tools for analyzing and further developing your options for improvement. And so what I've included, these are conventional analysis tools: SWOT analysis, SOAR analysis, pestle analysis, and noise analysis. And I'm sure there's others as well. So, those might be a good tool to for a team to stay objective and not be necessarily contentious or argumentative with one another as you're discussing what are priorities and what are not priorities. So that wraps up the recommendations section. So next steps would be to share this with your leadership, make recommendations for moving a process forward, and perhaps even reevaluating your steps to date, and consider having a conversation with an expert. So you have experts on the call, you have Brent's team, you have our team, and we are, ready and waiting. We're happy to walk you through this process as outlined again. We're happy to delve into specifics that your organization is facing or considering to face. And we're happy to dig more into the design and construction phase of a project. So that wraps up my portion of going over the handout, Brent. And Gina, if you have anything else to add, go ahead.
My only addition, and we are, this is so short, we're not going to get to it, but there's a lot of good kind of side conversation in the chat. If anybody saw it, people were sharing resources. There is obviously an equity, and someone else used the fairness component to this when you're considering, who has the privilege of being able to work from home, who are in roles where they can be more flexible, who would like to be home and can't. So what does your staff makeup look like, and who's going to have access to resources, who's going to have access to that flexibility and privilege, and making sure that those are part of your discussions around planning where you're going to be. And, for us, it's always particularly around, race and socioeconomic, all of those things. But yeah, we wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. So if anyone has questions, now's the time.
And Josh, can I just tee up one, and then
Yeah,
if
please.
anybody else has them? But the question, and I really am passionate about Gina's point about equity and fairness, and really the privilege of these spaces and how they use them. But it's slightly different, which is this sort of distinction between building versus leasing. And I think a lot of nonprofits are, that's the first discussion, which is, can we find a facility that we can lease? Can we find, or should we be, building something? What should some of the conversations be in your mind? What are the high points that these nonprofits should tee up at the very beginning about that distinction?
Right. So this conversation has changed dramatically. Leasing, I would say, let's start with just like the fundamental, like an owner occupant building is the purchase, or do I lease the building and I'm the only occupant? That's really going to depend on how the financial sustainability of your revenues moving forward. It also depends on how the capital campaign scene is going at the time. So right before the pandemic, the capital campaigns were, from what I heard from two different funders, more than ever. So what that tells me is that there's been a long conversation in Kansas City and beyond where nonprofits need to own their own building. They need to and not lease because they need to have site control. And I believe that that's real. That's having site control is very real. And sometimes you have to take a step in a direction of ownership that you may not really want to do because you need site control. But there's also other conversations. There's now with the pandemic and working from home and hybrid, there are opportunities that perhaps didn't exist before because the expectations were different. They've changed. So the operating expectations. So there are co-working spaces now that, like a WeWork, where it's really just, I wouldn't even say a collective. It's a collection of different organizations. And they get together and drink coffee and beer is basically where the collaboration begins and ends. But there's other organizations like 31 West 31st Street. It's small, but it's something to consider. In any case, there are opportunities to move into a work from home or a hybrid and use those spaces for meeting, to use those spaces for collaboration, to use those spaces in ways where you couldn't, if you had your own building, you couldn't really afford the time or expense for collaboration, for innovation. And maybe it's time to, my recommendation always is pinch until you outgrow something. Give yourself the opportunity to outgrow something. So with this new era that we're in, and we talk to foundations a lot. Like there's an expectation. Resource sharing has been a kind idea. It's going to start becoming more, and I think space sharing is a real opportunity right now. You're not going to trying to find a commercial tenant for your space right now. It's going to be tough because everybody's hybrid or work from home right now. But there could be some opportunities to find organizations who are in a similar boat, and there could be a shared workplace strategy that you could take on in one location and get great funding for that, and an opportunity to maybe position that strategy or even a co-working strategy in a co-working space as, we're putting community needs forward again, our programs forward again. And the way that we get there is that we limit our risk of facility related costs. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to do. So sharing some of those responsibilities in a multitude of ways, I think is a good recommendation. Is it universal? No. A pre-K provider, they're not going to go to WeWork, provide services. And I think sometimes what I want everyone to know too is that the real estate market is a little nutty. It doesn't make sense at all right now. There's all sorts of capital's doing all sorts of crazy things right now. And what the result is on us in our community is that buildings and land are more expensive than ever. We're going to start seeing interest rates go up. Even nonprofit lenders, some, not all, are starting to take on for-profit standards. Getting tax credits is becoming more of a for-profit game than a not-for-profit game. So it's really going to depend on what's available space-wise, what's the cost, and what's the financing and funding available. And from there, a good attorney to negotiate a solid lease agreement could be helpful too.
So, oh, sorry, Gina.
No. Go ahead.
Well, we're at time, but I just wanted to summarize. First off, Robin, you have a really good question, and we'll circle around to you maybe offline or after. I know people have to hop, but I think what I'm hearing, Josh, is lean on some experts, because this is a really dynamic time right now, and this is not a time to sort of just gut it out, right? Just say, well, my gut says this is time where it's probably worth an investment in having experts at the table to do that. So I really just want to quickly thank Josh and Gina for their help. I know they've offered up being there. If you have quick questions for them, they'll be able to answer it for you. And just absolutely love everybody being here. Thanks for spending your Tuesday morning with us. Look forward to future sessions. And again, thanks, Gina and Josh. And we'll see everybody around. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I haven't heard, and I don't think, maybe I can speak for Gina as well. In our conversations, it's hit or miss if organizations are reimbursing for home expenses. I was in a work for home situation with my past employer, and I was not getting reimbursed, and that conversation was just about to happen. But my kids were home from school, and they needed a full-time parent, so I left and became that. But yeah, I think it needs to be, and I think you could show those costs, those true costs, in a one-time budget or in and an annual budget, and do a comparison of that to facility construction costs. And I think you're going to win over funders and lenders any day of the week.
Yeah. It is amazing how quickly the space is changing, though, and the philanthropy environment and sort of the appetite for capital expenditures it's a rapidly evolving space. I know. So I did some research. I had talked to you and Gina about this a while back, but in the Great Recession, those organizations that owned their building, fixed assets, were much more likely to go bankrupt and have to close their doors than those who didn't. So that flexibility at that time period, at least on a national scale, was really important. And I think, that flexibility versus the solidity of an asset that you own is a really important discussion for folks.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of great arguments on both sides. I think it comes down to the circumstances of the market, the cost of capital, funders' willingness to back it up. It really is circumstantial, and it's a tough process to navigate.